Hello, my name is AJ Goldsby, and I'm a life master from Pensacola, Florida. And I'm coming to you today to bring you my game of the month for January 2012. And I do have this, I have a very comprehensive web page. I've already finished the web page. It's not actually posted yet, but by the time you see this video, it will be posted. It has almost 50 regular diagrams and roughly about a dozen analysis diagrams. So the web page itself is very complete. I'm not going to try to completely redo this game. Once more, I don't look at my videos as being totally instruction. I try to give more or less commentary on my videos, and exact analysis oftentimes will be covered on the web page itself. And of course, you can see that. And if you look in the little box just below the video, there's a little section there on the YouTube channel just below the video itself where it says show more. If you'll click on that, you'll be able to see the link for my webpage when this video is posted. And today we're looking at a game, but again, this is my January game of the month. And this is a game between Nikita Vitiugov, he was rated 27-29, and Alexander Morozevich, and he's rated 27-62. And Morozevich is actually, he dropped out of the top players in the world for just a little while, maybe a year or two. And he even stopped playing chess. I believe he was playing poker for a while. But anyway, Morozevich has now returned to chess, and of course he's shot back up to where he belongs. He's easily one of the best players in the world. And this is a very interesting chess game. There was a lot of factors that figured into my wanting to do this chess game. First of all, the game itself was just a wonderful, wonderful, tremendously complex game. A lot of times, some players, they would, offer a draw and take a quick draw in the last round of a chess tournament, but not Alexander Morozevich. I've always viewed him as a very exciting player and a very interesting player to follow his games. And I believe Kramnik once said that with Morozevich, it's always interesting. It's never boring to watch one of his games. And I would have to say, for the most part, that's pretty true. In my opinion, he's easily one of the most exciting grandmasters in the world today, especially in the top, say, 20 or 30 or so in the world. But anyway, this is a game from the 54th Reggio Emilia tournament, or Reggio Emilia tournament. It was played last year. It was a double round robin, and it was won by Anish Giri. And in the last round, uh, Nakamura had been leading the tournament, and unfortunately for Nakamura, three straight losses in the last three rounds pretty much knocked him out of the top spot. He lost in the Nakamura lost in the last round to Ivanchuk, and Morozevich he had a kind of a late surge, and he was shooting for first, and he wanted if he had won this game, he would have been clear first, hands down. And unfortunately, he also lost, and that was a very strange series of events, which allowed young Giri or Giri to take the top spot. And that was another reason that I wanted to examine this game, because usually you don't, it takes a real. It was almost an unbelievable, series of coincidences that allowed Giri. I don't know if you say Giri or Giri, whichever is correct, but my guess would be Giri. But anyway, it was a very strange series of events that allowed this young player to win first. This game was also one of the most complex games I'd ever seen. And another very good reason for me to do this game as my game of the month was the fact that I had never, as far as I could determine, ever in my in fact, I don't think I could even find another annotated game where I did a in-depth look at the English opening, and certainly not in my game of the month website. I've done almost 50 games in my regular column, and there's dozens of supplemental games, and in none of those games had I ever looked at a English opening. And so this, I felt like there was a whole bunch of factors, and that really pointed to making this game, the game to look at for my January of 2012 game of the month. And so I decided to look at this. Like I said, the opening was a big factor in that. I had never actually looked at an English opening, so that was a very good reason to do that. And make sure you check out my webpage. Again, I'm not going to try to analyze this game in depth, nor will I touch on everything that I touched on in the web page. I don't want to rehash everything I did in the web page because that would just be boring. I want to try to just maybe point out some things and talk about the game itself, and maybe add some commentary and talk about things maybe that I did not cover in the web page. But let's just go ahead and take a look at the game. The game, as I said, starts out C4. This is the English opening. The opening is named after one of the great British players of all time, Howard Staunton. He certainly brought this opening to the forefront. Before Howard Staunton, no player in his right mind would have ever thought of beginning a chess game with one C4. Of course, today we know that's a very legitimate opening. All the top grandmasters, many top grandmasters, maybe not all the top grandmasters, use C4 in their repertoire. And oftentimes, too, it's a highly transpositional move. They'll play C4, but, they're playing C4 to avoid possibly maybe say, other lines that black might play. And there's different ways of doing that. So anyway, C4 is a very interesting opening. Of course, it hits this D5 square. That's a very good move because it hits the D5 square. And it's a really, a lot of times if black, say, plays E5, then you can actually get into a reverse kind of Sicilian. And Botvinnik actually felt like it was a mistake for black to play E5 because then white has um, a Sicilian with an extra tempo, especially if black tries to break with D5, then white has an open Sicilian with colors reversed, but also with extra tempo because he has the white pieces. And I've played this way a few times in my career. And also, if you want to see a very brilliant game that I've already annotated, it's out there on the internet, and I'm sure you can find it with any chess engine. Be sure to find a game between Botvinnik was white and Portish was black, and it was played, I believe, in Monaco back in the 60s, and it's a very brilliant game by uh, Mikhail Botvinnik, and just a very brilliant game, of maybe one of Botvinnik's prettiest games. And I've annotated that game, and you can find that game, I'm sure, very quickly with any search engine. But anyway, white plays C4 here. That's a good move. Like I said, it hits the center, hits the D5 square, and white can follow it up with quick development. And also too, it doesn't prevent allow your opponent a lot of targets. In other words, there's no easy straight way of for black to equalize. And also too, another thing nice about the English opening is that it there's no clear cut path for equality. In other words, it's not like a lot of different openings where you know like some lines of the double king pawn opening, black can basically just trade pieces at every opportunity and try to make a draw, and that's true of double queen pawn openings. And I would say that's less true in the English. It's a little bit harder because even if black plays c5, white can avoid contact, and there's various ideas that white can use to avoid the quick draw. So I think C4 is a very good opening, and a lot of the top grandmasters use it. Kramnik, Nakamura, and many of the top GMs have used it. And and I do provide in my webpage, I do provide a pretty comprehensive what I consider state of the theory. In other words, I have about a dozen books and DVDs also on the English opening. So I used all of those, and I tried to and use the power book and all the tools on the computer, and I tried to provide what I believe to be a very current state of the art opening survey in my webpage. And again, I'm not going to recover any of that. I'm not going to look at too many of the games because that's already on the webpage, and I don't need to recover that. But anyway, the game starts off c4, black plays knight f6. This is a very transpositional move. Obviously, it's a good developing move. Black develops a piece. He's controlling the center. He's getting ready to castle maybe quickly. He can push his e-pawn or g-pawn and then castle quickly. So black can do all of those things. But also, too, it's kind of a transpositional move. In other words, that if white, say plays d4 now, then black can play e6 and head for a Nimzo Indian, and that may be something that a lot of grandmasters don't really like to face. They like to avoid the Nimzo Indian. And so anyway, knight f6, that's just a good move. That's not the only way of meeting the English. Of course, some of the top choices of meeting the English are as black can play e5 against the English. And again, I've already touched on that. And there's quite a bit of, there's a game quoted on my website. Black can play, the symmetrical line, c5. And that usually today will lead to the hedgehog. That seems to be the path that most grandmasters head down when they play c5, although that's not the only choice open for white or black. There are literally dozens of choices and many different variations and lines and ideas. And probably the third major choice, of course, for black is knight f6. And another way of playing this position is black could simply play 1 e6 here and follow up with knight f6 and d5 and head for the queen's gambit decline. And that's oftentimes the way Spassky, when his opponents would play c4. I know for many, many years, if someone played c4 against Spassky, he would play e6 and d5 and basically head for his favorite TMV variation, which is the Tartikow or Makaganov-Bondarevsky system against the queen pawn, which, Spassky for many years had never lost a single game for him. Game with that variation until Fischer beat him in the six-match game of the 1972 World Championship match. And I've annotated that game too, and you can find that game on the internet with any search engine. So anyway, black just plays knight f6, and both players are kind of shadow boxing here a little bit too in the opening. It's like who's going to blink first, who's going to make the first decision to commit to a specific opening setup. So there's a little bit of chess psychology going on here as well. White plays knight c3. That's just a good developing move. And black plays d5. Now that's a very committal move there. That move changes the game, very dramatically. Of course, black can still play c5. He can play c5, which is a symmetrical. He can play e5, which would transpose to 1e5. He can also play g6 and head for a Grunfeld or a King's Indian. So there's still a lot of choices for black. Black can play e6, and if white plays d4, bishop b4 would be a Nimzo Indian. And of course, white could play, I even saw one grandmaster who played an early a3 here, and after eventually d4, knight f3, we transposed into a Queen's Indian. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways that, that white and black can respond here or react here. But black plays d5, and this is what MCO calls to as the the Grunfeld system, rather, of the English opening. And that's a very committal move there, but it's also a very good move because obviously black's, he's freeing his queen bishop. His queen's got some space now. It's a very vigorous move. It's, putting a pawn in the center. And so that's actually the way, that, I like to teach lower rated players when I'm teaching a beginner or an amateur to play chess. This is exactly the kind of thing that I like to see them do because they're immediately fighting for the center. Okay, white takes, black takes, now white fianchettos. Of course, this is a very good move. The bishop on the long diagonal is a very common theme in the English opening. Also, too, there's another option here. I saw a game where Rubinstein, both as black and white, very oftentimes masters used to like to play early e4, but black plays knight b4 and hammers away at the d3 square. I think that variation has more or less fallen out of favor. I haven't seen any games and by top grandmasters lately, that have been playing that line. Although every line comes into fashion and goes out for a while. So basically, if you wait long enough, I believe you'll see just about every line come and go. Certainly back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of openings were a lot like, hemlines and fashions and ladies wear. Openings came into fashion and then quickly went out of fashion. And it really wasn't determined by the actual worth of the opening itself. I just think one person would play a great game in a specific line, and basically all the other masters would rush to copy that person's success in that line. And certainly before computers, oftentimes there was a long time when someone would play a TN, a theoretical novelty, and it would stand for a long time. And until you busted that TN or came up with an adequate way of meeting that opening, it wasn't really clear how one side or the other should react. So many grandmasters would simply imitate simply because they wanted to copy that person's success. And the onus was usually on the defender to find the way out to modify or to neutralize the first player's advantage. But anyway, white plays g3 here. This is just a fianchetto. This is a very standard idea in a lot of closed openings, especially the English. And basically, you want to fianchetto your bishop and get it on the long diagonal here. Black plays knight takes c3. I don't really like that move myself. It's not a bad move per se, but I try to teach my students to get away from that. If I'm black in this particular position, I would probably just play c5 here. I believe that's a very good move. Or g6 and bishop g7 would also be an indicated move there. And he doesn't have to worry about the bishop on a double attack. Right now, the queen is defending the knight, and until this bishop comes up, he doesn't really have to defend about this knight. The drawback to this knight takes c3 move is, number one, is white can take here, he gets another pawn in the center, and number 2, the b file will be opened for white's rook on a1. B takes c3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, rook b1. And now here we're just going to scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to show you basically with just colorized variation here. The idea, as you can see very quickly, now the white rook on b1, white has tremendous pressure with the bishop on the long diagonal. It's really hard for black to easily neutralize that. I mean, he can get a decent game, but it's not at all easy for black to neutralize white's pressure. So that's why I personally don't like that knight takes c3 line. It's not that it's necessarily bad, but it's just very committal for black, and it also, I think, the engines seem to indicate that it gives white lasting pressure, and that's maybe one reason why black should have avoided that line. But anyway, white plays 7 rook b1 here. Knight c6. Now this is a very big time move here, a very important place in the chess game. Normally in queenside pawn openings, you don't want to block your c-pawn. Black needs his, in queen pawn openings and closed positions like the English and queenside openings. In other words, the pawns, the action's more on the queen side than on the king side. In those type of openings, I was taught long ago by chess masters and strong players, and also this information's in a lot of books, that black normally doesn't want to play his knight to c6 because that blocks his queen bishop pawn, his c-pawn from being able to move in and to attack the center. But it's very obvious to me that Morozevich is going for piece play, and he also probably had something very specifically prepared here. I don't think that this is, cuff type, just off the cuff type play. Most players, top players today, you have to have things fairly deeply prepared and have studied your opponent's games and, have everything prepared, pretty deeply. So I think Morozevich has a very specific opening idea in mind, and also too the fact that I found on one website that one player had indicated. In fact, there was a video I found on the internet, and it showed that black did not use a lot of time in the opening. So to me, those factors would indicate that Morozevich had specifically prepared this line just for this opponent or for this tournament. White plays h4. This is a very interesting move here. H4 is just an idea of h5, and this is a fairly modern move here. If you'd have played this move back in the 70s when I was coming up, people would have laughed at you. They'd said, well, you don't know what chess is, because chess is all about the opening. The openings are about, controlling the center and getting your pieces out very quickly. And a move like h4 seems to ignore the center and just pushing a pawn and creating a new weakness. But the main idea here is obviously that white might play h5 and open up the h file. And there's some games in the database. Again, they're quoted on my website, and you can see either links to them or see the text scores from them if you'll go to my webpage for this game on my website. That website is www.ajschess.com, and there's links there for my Game of the Month website. But if you'll go to my Game of the Month for January 2012, you'll see my analysis is very deep, and I quote some of the other games there. But h4 is an idea that white goes for a very quick, rapid opening of the h file, and if black cannot meet this idea, then it's really not, the game can go against black very quickly. And some players have suggested, some of the players down at my chess club think, well, why not black just play h5 here? That'll stop him moving the h file. And supposedly, their pawns are the same on the king side now, and wouldn't white's queen side, white's king side rather, squares be weakened just as much as black? Yes and no, because the main reason is white has a knight here that can go here or here and then go to g5 square, and to kick that knight off of g5, black would basically have to play f6, and that would be a huge weakening of black's game. So h5 isn't necessarily the easy answer that some of the players that I've shown this game to might have thought it was. Black plays h6. That's almost an ugly move to make, but it might be forced, because again, if black allows white to open the h file, theory has very clearly shown that white can get a quick advantage. So h6 is what Morozevich is doing here, and it's very obvious with a move like this to me that Morozevich is not playing for a draw. He's playing for complications and to make the game exciting, and he's trying to avoid the opening of the h file. And now if white plays h5, black can just go g5, and that pawn on h5 might just be a weakness later on. So anyway, now we just sort of finish our development here. Both sides have castled. Here it's very, very clear that, white's slightly better here. He's got, he's going to have more pawns in the center, and he's going to have a little bit better development. And also the rook on the b file. It's mostly a space type thing, so white's very clearly better here, and all the engines confirm that. And there are many different ideas here for white. White could play queen a4. He could play queen c2, queen b3. He can go for a fast rush in the center. He can redeploy his pieces to various squares. He can play, queen c2 and d3 and play slowly. He can, try to grab the center, play queen c2 and d4 and e4, and just try to dominate the center with his extra pawn. He has an extra pawn in the center, so there's lots of different ideas there for white. But anyway, black now plays e5, and the engines don't really necessarily like that move. They seem to indicate that gives white a very large advantage, but I think black has to do something like that. And also too, Morozevich's style, anyone who's ever studied this player's games knows that he doesn't play boring chess. He doesn't play quote unquote safe chess. And so if you're looking at this game, you very quickly recognize, this is the way Morozevich plays chess. He plays fighting chess. He plays uncompromised chess, and even daring chess, if you will. Sometimes dangerous chess, but that's just the way Morozevich plays. White plays d3. Again, here now black has the idea of maybe playing e4 and kicking this knight, or f5 and e4. So d3 basically is a way of putting a stop to that. And now black plays king h7, and as far as I could tell, this is the first new move. This is a TN. This is the first new move of this chess game. Before this known theory, black had played rook e8 here. And now white plays knight d2. This is a good move here. Basically, he's redeploying his pieces, freeing his bishop on the long diagonal. In other words, no b6 now for black to neutralize the pressure of this rook, because white just grabs the knight on c6. And also too, now this the knight d2 makes it much harder for black to get in a quick e5 e4 here. Black plays f5. Again, it's very clear what black's doing. He's trying to get something going. He's grabbing space. He's trying to make some attacking aggressive moves. White plays bishop a3. Black goes rook f6. Queen c2, queen e8. e3. Now that was a move that was kind of surprising there. The engines want to move one of the rooks over, and I wouldn't have necessarily gone e3, but it's very obvious that Vitiugov is going for his pawn structure on e3 and d4. I don't know if that's best or not. Another idea here for white is maybe to put this rook, the b file is not that big of a deal anymore. A very interesting idea for white here would be to play this rook here to e1 and go e4 and f4, and basically just try to rip open lines to the black king. I mean, that would have been a totally different type of game there had, white chosen to play that way. But apparently white's playing a little bit passively. And I'm not sure if Vitiugov, or however you say his name, was purposely playing passively, or it just sort of worked out that way. But it just seems like the entire game, one of the themes of this game will be that white is playing very passively, and eventually this allows Morozevich the possibility of launching a devastating and an amazing, brilliant kingside attack. White plays e3, black plays b6. Notice that the queen now here is holding the knight on c6. So no free knight. Now black can play moves like bishop b7 or bishop a6 and move his rook. And then the pressure of this rook on b1 has been negated somewhat, because the pawn is not hanging on b7 anymore. And if you get this rook off this long diagonal, basically, and move this knight, basically the white bishop's just hitting empty air. It's not hitting a specific target. So at least this helps take the pressure off black's game a little bit. White plays d4, bishop a6. This is a nice move because it's made with tempo, hitting the rook e1, e4. And now black has succeeded in bottling up white's very powerful king bishop. And that's got to be good for black and bad for white. Again, I'm not sure why white allowed this. That you'd have to really go into some deep analysis, and also, just really have to interview the white player in detail, and try to get him to pick his brain and find out what kind of thoughts were going through his head. But here, this is a major change in the game, and really a victory, a strategic victory for black. Morozevich has succeeded in bearing a pawn on e4, and in my opinion, this is greatly increases the chance that Morozevich is going to be able later to launch a winning kingside attack. Meanwhile, white is not without chances here. Black's his whole queenside looks a little shaky. One idea here for white would have been just simply to go here and exchange off the light squared bishops. And, if bishop takes, king takes, and this king can always run to the e2 square, and I'm not so sure that. And white's got a lot of chances on the queen side then. I mean, he can play c4 and, play his other rook here and maybe play c5. He's got all kinds of ideas there. So it's not white's not without chances here. So, but anyway, white played here c4. Black goes rook c8. That's just getting the bishop off the long diagonal and also protecting a possible pawn. In other words, if white opens the c file. In fact, I think now white is less likely to open the c file, play c5, because this rook on, if the c file gets opening, then the white queen will be embarrassed here and have to move again. So anyway, Morozevich is again playing solid moves. And now white plays queen a4. According to Houdini, I think Houdini likes f3 here, and Fritz likes bishop f1. Both of those moves were probably a little bit better than queen a4. I'm not even sure why Vitiugov played queen a4. To me, that shows me he's playing for a draw. I mean, if he's playing for the win, I don't see the winning plan there, or the strategy whereby he might be allowed to win, unless he's just going for the end game. Maybe he's thinking that it's just a common sense idea. If I get the queens off the board, then I'm less likely to be checkmated. But anyway, white plays queen a4 there. And black plays knight b8. He's going for, just a swap of the queens, which white seems happy to do. The queens come off the board. White plays 21 rec1. Black plays knight d7. Now we go knight b3, and we get rook f7. And now we've reached a balance of power, if you will. It's the game is perfectly balanced. And, you can just see that here. I think black's got a lot of chances, as I show with this little colorized variation. He's got all kinds of ideas here for active play, whereas for white to come up with some active play, it's not so easy. In fact, black can actually play on both sides of the chessboard, and white's very clearly only limited. He's the only side of the board he's going to be playing is on the queen side, and I think his plans are somewhat limited. I would say practically it's much easier now to play black than it is to play white. Certainly that would be true, say, at the 1600 level of chess. But going back here, anyway, black plays rook f7, and white plays bishop b4. Now black plays c5. According to the computers, black should have first played rook c8 and then c5. Of course, Morozevich, he seems to have his thumb on the pulse of this position, and I wouldn't want to second guess such a good grandmaster. He seems to almost realize that his opponent is playing very passively. Maybe he already had just felt somehow or realized that his opponent would play another passive move, and that's exactly what white does there. He plays bishop b2. Again, white seems to be playing passively. And on my webpage, I analyze a lot of the different alternatives, improvements for both sides, and you can all find that on the webpage. I'm not going to go over that again here, but I know a grandmaster like white, 2700, a guy's rated 2729. He's got to know and understand that repeated passive moves are going to place you in danger of losing the game. So I'm not sure what was going through his head there, what he saw. Again, without an in-depth interview with the Grandmaster Vitiugov, and find out what he was thinking, we will never know. But he just, in this game, he seems to be quite happy to be making very passive moves, and I think he's just encouraging Morozevich. It's almost, maybe that was part of his game plan. Maybe he thought that if he played seemingly passively, that Morozevich would overreach. I'm not sure what white was playing for here, but whatever the actual intent here, it's really unclear. Now black plays g5 here. According to the engines here, black should play exchange on d4 and then maybe play rook c8 or g5 and first. But Morozevich it's pretty obvious what Morozevich is going for. He's going for a kingside attack, and I think it's justified in view of white's repeated passive moves. He continues to play passively. Takes 26 a4. Now this is a correct move here. White has to get something going on the queen side. I mean, he can't continue to just do nothing moves, move back and forth. He's going to get killed here if he does. Black now plays c takes d4, e takes d4, and now f4. And it's all according to plan. And if you'll go to my webpage and look at the note after move 22, I explain exactly what some of the plans are for both sides, especially for black's plan. Black's strategy is basically playing for just a kingside attack. It's really not that complicated. So black's playing for f4. He's going for the all-out kingside bombardment. Whereas white, again, he has to continue to look for chances on the queen side. And a5 here, that move is pretty much forced and best. It's correct. White must open lines on the queen side and make something happen on the queen side. He certainly can't sit around and twiddle his thumbs. Now here, according to what, and then I did several deep analysis, deep position analysis with several chess engines using Fritz, using Ribka 3 and Houdini and etc. And it seems like that black's best move at this position would have been king g6. And I think it's really in Morozevich's favor to maintain the tension. But for whatever reason, black, he decided to just go ahead and play f3. Of course, that move's not without danger for black. In fact, that's a strategic victory for black. Black has slammed the door on white's king bishop rather, his light squared bishop, and basically forced white to move again. And now white's got a decision to make, and he very obviously should play the correct move for him is bishop h3. And all the engines seem to indicate that that is the correct move for white. And once more, we see another passive move for white. He plays, bishop f1, and that's again bishop h3. The engines indicate the correct move was bishop h3, which would have, he could have at least exchanged off that very passive bishop, but he didn't do that. White plays king g6. That's a very good move. That's and we've reached a very critical stage now in the chess game. White has to be extremely careful here. And this is a game I think really that every beginner should study. Not because I annotated, but because it shows the danger of how repeated passive moves will almost always place you in danger of losing the game, especially if you're playing, a really good opponent like Morozevich. And, that's exactly what White's done here. He's repeatedly seemingly chose second best moves or, passive moves, almost if he was intentionally playing this way. And Morozevich is basically, he's going for the win. Now, the engine seemed to indicate that White's correct move here is rook e1. He has to get on this e-pawn, and basically the idea is, prevent black from trading pieces. And that seems to be the correct idea there. Is that if black moves off, he loses the e-pawn. White played a takes b6 here. I'm sure he had to have been expecting, black to recapture somehow. And now it's really amazing because now the game is turned into after a series of second best moves by white for whatever reason. There was lots of different reasons. I mean, if I went into all of them, we'd be here literally for hours, and I don't want to do that. But for many different reasons, white's consistently chosen second best, third best, and very passive and tame moves. And now all of a sudden, Morozevich, the position here is a chess problem. And in case you haven't seen this game yet, and if you want to pause the video here, I'm going to stop talking in just a second. And if you would like, you can pause the video and try to figure out basically what would you do here. What's the winning plan for black? I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now. Okay, if you did as I suggested, you paused the video here and maybe studied this position for just a few minutes and tried to figure out, what the winning plan was for black. Because the problem, the position has literally become a chess problem, black to move and win. And, it's a very amazing move. In my opinion, a double exclam move. Black plays bishop f6. He's going to sack literally 2 pawns, but he's going to get a 1 game because it's a very simple idea, actually. I mean, it's really not that complicated of an idea. It wasn't that deeply hitting. The threat is to get both rooks on the H file, and then all of a sudden the white king is going to be threatened with checkmate. So anyway, bishop to f6. White's next move was forced, rook e1, and now black plays rook h8. And again, that was, all best. White grabs the e-pawn here, rook takes e4, and now black plays rf h7. And suddenly, white's lost. I mean, there's no doubt about it. If you analyze this with any chess engine, you just take your pick, Houdini, Ribka, Fritz. I mean, the list goes on and on. But you pick any strong chess engine and analyze this position for any length of time, you'll become convinced that this is just a lost game for white. And of course, there's this checkmate threat down here on h1. And I have another little colorized variation here. Just shows you, this shows you, it looks like, in my opinion here, black has all the threats. His pieces have got all kinds of range, and there's some very specific threats here. But of course, the overwhelming threat is this mate on the h1 square. And the only way that white can stop that now is to give up an entire rook for a pawn. Rook h4, g takes h4, bishop d3 check, king g7, bishop takes h7, king takes h7. When I first played through this game, I thought that, Vitiugov would just made a desperation move. In other words, he gets back in exchange, but he's going to be a piece down, very clearly going to be lost. And I thought he was just playing, basically, going to play a few moves and then resign. But apparently, Vitiugov, he's not without chances here. And one of the problems that white's going to have, one of the problems that black's going to have is that if he had captured on a7 here, I think in some lines white just slam runs out of pawns. And that's one of the big problems with this position. And also, too, it's a position that's still very complex. And apparently by this point, Morozevich was in a little bit of time pressure. And so, and I learned that by watching one of the videos on the Reggio Emilia tournament itself. But anyway, for whatever reason now, black missteps. He begins to go wrong. He's played a very brilliant game. Should be just a matter of gathering in the material and playing a few precise moves and logical moves and just reaping the benefits of his early work. Just a brilliant game. But that unfortunately that isn't what happened here. And that's what I was trying to determine. One of the reasons I wanted to look at this game, it was so complex. I wasn't sure if this was a deliberate sacrifice and, white just calculated, 30 moves ahead and had all this stuff figured out or what happened here. And so I basically, I was really interested. I was looking at the game the first time and looking at just the game score. I was really curious as if I couldn't ascertain what all the reasons and factors were for, what happened in this game. White played rook a1 here. Again, the correct move there was white should have played, backing up here. He should have played, I believe the correct move is b takes a7. Now, a lot of the engines rate that position as still winning for black, but the problem is that if you go deep enough, you have to go 20 or 30 moves in some of the lines. Some of the end games are actually drawn just due to the fact that, like an extra piece for black, if all he has is an extra piece, that's not going to be enough to checkmate with. So, a lot of the end games are drawn because if black had even one more pawn on the board, that would greatly change the situation. So I'm pretty sure that b takes a7. First of all, it's the indicated move by the engines, and secondly, it's logical just because if you know the endings, if white can get enough material off the board, then black's extra piece isn't going to mean a whole lot. That's the whole problem for black trying to win in a nutshell. But white plays rook a1 here, and now it should just be a one game for black. I believe the correct move now. Well, he plays bishop takes c4, rook takes a7. Those moves are pretty much forced, and now we've reached a very very critical position, and I just can't believe that um, um, Morozevich didn't play this move. I mean, if you're just playing chess, well, a lot of times I try to play chess according to general principle, and especially if I'm short of time and not calculate here. There's basically two good candidate moves for. Take the knight on b3 or move your rook to d8 to protect your knight. And this rook is in such a sorry square right now. It's totally in the corner, totally without play. If I'm looking and this knight here is really not threatening anything or doing anything. Also, too, this knight here is very, very important because one of the ideas black's got to be concerned about is like, for example, bishop f4 and just shoving this pawn in. And so, logically, if white's really got his, if black's really got his thinking cap on, and if he's really thinking, he figures all this out very, very quickly. Unfortunately, I think here Morozevich must have been short of time, and for whatever reason, he just doesn't find the right move here. He plays bishop takes b3. That is just a major, major bad move, major mistake, major miscalculation, major misassessment of the entire situation on the chessboard, and also a violation of chess logic itself. Again, I've already explained the factors. Rook d8 was crying out to be played, but for whatever reason, Morozevich didn't do that. And it's, before you criticize a player like Morozevich, I'm also an active chess player, and I can tell you when you're short of time, it's very easy to make make a mistake, to make an error in your chess calculations. So before you're too hard on Morozevich, you have to realize A, he was playing to win, B, he played a brilliancy and probably worked very hard to get to this position. Unfortunately, here he just didn't find the right move. Black still may not be lost here, but unfortunately now he begins to slide downhill. And to me, this is another factor besides the video that I saw on the internet, was the showing that a few of the shots from the game that Black might be in time pressure here. There's also too, the moves themselves, and like a detective, that Black consistently fails to find the best move. There's got to be a reason for that, and most of the time in modern chess, time pressure was a problem. But anyway, bishop takes b3. Rook takes d7 check, king g6, bishop at f4, h takes g3, bishop takes g3. This is White's 40th move. And now White's okay, and a lot of the machines are showing that White might even be just a little bit better here. And Black is, he's got to be asking, the basic question for Black is he's got to get all of his pieces to really good squares, maybe even try to threaten a checkmate or two. One idea for Black is maybe bring his bishop, put his rook in the corner, try to check on the first row, bring the bishop back around, and threaten White with a checkmate. Try to get his rook down, bishop here, and then check, and then rook here, and it's a mate. So that would be one of the first things I would be trying if I were Black in that position. And also too, the analysis shows here that the only chance for Black was bishop e6. And the machine analysis, again with engines, finds the line rook d6, bishop c8, rook takes f6, king takes f6, bishop e5 check, king e6, king takes h8, king d5. Now, objectively, this probably should be a one game for White because he's two pawns up. However, it's not going to be easy because, I didn't spend days and days analyzing it. I'm not sure that White can win. But I will tell you this, that it's just opposite colored bishops. And anybody who knows anything about endgames knows that one pawn, and sometimes even two pawns, can't win, or it's very difficult to win because of the difficulty involved with opposite colored bishop in games. And again, engines point to this line too. I mean, it was the only line that, with deep analysis, and if you give the engines plenty of time, Black had to play that. But he didn't find that move there. And again, he might have been in time pressure. That's another factor to me that indicates that something must have been wrong with Black's game. In other words, he must have been short of time because he consistently fails to find the best continuation and the best defense. White played bishop a4. Now, that White's going to find a shot here. It's just real simple. Rook d6. Now there's the threat of rook takes bishop and bishop e5. Well, rook takes bishop and bishop e5 check and win this rook in the corner. And also that pawn might sail in. So, Black's position suddenly has gone from winning in just a few moves to now his position's on the critical list. I mean, he's literally in ICU, and, he's on life support. And wow, it's just really sad and amazing to see that, with just a few inaccurate moves, how quickly this game turned around. But that can happen in chess. Anyone who has really studied chess, and I'm 53 years old, and I've been playing chess and studying chess my entire life, and I can tell you this is not the first game that can happen. It's almost unfair sometimes how quickly that you can have a great position, totally one position, and just one or two bad moves can spoil your game. And I'm sure any player who's played in tournaments or played in competition can relate to that. But anyway, White plays rook d6, rook g8, b7, king f5. And now the simplest line for White is just simply, seems the engines seem to indicate this too, and it's what I thought when I was first playing of the game. Play rook b6 and promote your b pawn, and it's pretty much just a one game for White. I don't know what Vitiugov was thinking here, or if, he was trying to be too fancy, or, maybe he was in time pressure too. Whatever the reason, he also is, he doesn't blow the wind, but he's playing some unnecessary sort of extra finessey, over finessing type moves that really weren't necessary in this position. Rook a6, bishop takes d4, b8 queen, rook takes b8, bishop takes b8, bishop c2. Now, at first glance, you might say, oh, this is an easy win for White. All he's got to do is trade off the dark squared bishops. That might be true if you're playing with a chess engine. If you're sitting there with a chess engine running, then everything's easy, and you don't really have to worry about anything, and you really shouldn't worry about analyzing a chess game because, if you're not going to ever learn anything about chess, number one. And number two, if you really want to get better at chess, obviously when you're playing, you can't have a chess engine running. So with a chess engine running, the engine will very quickly find the one game. But without a chess engine, and I analyzed this position quite a while, even with the help of chess engine, it's going to be very hard for White to force the win. He does come up with a good move here, king h2. There's a nice little tactic there. That's just a simple tactic. If Black plays bishop takes pawn f2, White goes rook a2, You got two bishops there that are being skewered on the second rank, and basically black's going to lose a piece. So that was a nice little way of activating a tactic that gave white the ability to activate his king. And um, so that was a good tactic by white. And now, black, he continues to play good moves here, but he doesn't find the best moves. In fact, in one or two more moves, he's going to make a really bad move. Bishop d3, that was okay there. But the very best move, I think, was king g4. That's the kind of an engine move there, but that was the idea, is to defend this pawn and keep white's king out of the game. And that's the engine move. But white played, rather black played bishop d3, and now white played, rook a4. There is a little bit of a trap there. I think that's what maybe Morozevich was playing for there. He's hoping for rook d6 when bishop e5 check and bishop takes rook, and then black doesn't have to worry about losing anymore. So maybe that's what he was trying to do, was set a cheap trap. I don't know if that was his logic for that move, or he just didn't have enough time to find anything better. But anyway, white plays rook a4 there. And here again, white's winning plan has got to be to force the dark squared bishops off. Therefore, that's going to be the last thing that black should allow. And for whatever reason, Morozevich plays bishop e5 check. After that bishop comes off, the game becomes pretty much a simple win for white. Maybe not simple to the beginner, but certainly simple for this rank of player, for the grandmaster. And the engines, they just go absolutely nuts here. And the evaluations of all the engines just literally skyrocket. They take off after this move. So this has got to be considered, black's last mistake here. And after this, it's just totally lost. And now it's just a fairly simple win for white. Black's got to defend his f3 pawn. If he drops that, it's very obviously just a win. Now white tries basically to checkmate or tempo black out of his pawn. That never succeeds, but he does succeed in nailing this black king to the first row, which is very important, because now the black king is nailed to the first row, and that's very bad for black. That's good for white and bad for black. His king comes over, rook goes to a7, king goes to... Now the winning plan here for white in this position, I had a lot of students say, oh, I don't know how to win this, and they didn't see how white was going to make progress. White can't force the checkmate, and because he can't ever put black in Zugzwang, because this bishop will always have some move on the chessboard. Well, the winning plan here is very simple. If you know anything about chess and anything about endgames, you basically just keep the black king nailed on the first row for as long as possible, march the white king back, and win this pawn. And you'll see that that's exactly what white does here. King f4, king g8, now rook a3, king f7, rook takes, bishop takes, king takes f3, king f6, king f4. And here this is just a very simple win for white. Morozevich realizes that and goes ahead and resigns here. If you have to see the win, then the actual win here would be, if you want to see the proof, this is again with table basis, so this is absolutely without error here. There's no doubt that this is one of the correct lines here for white. It's all like, just you turn on, if you have a table base here, the engine stops analyzing here and begins showing mate and X. I mean, it actually knows how many moves it is till checkmate. King g5, that's the logical move. You want to keep the king in front of the pawn here. King f5, king f5, king e7, f3, king there, f4, king e7, doink. See, the whole idea is the white king's trying to outflank the black king, and then get to the g7 square, which is the ideal square, because then you can shove your pawn in and queen. King e6. Another possible line there is the black king could drop back to f8, but then white has a simple win by just simply grabbing the opposition, tempoing, black by playing king f6 himself. The black king's got to step to one side or the other. The white king will step forward, control the promotion square for the pawn, and just ram the pawn home. But anyway, king e6, check, push, and now the white king controls the promotion square, and it's a very easy win. And again, that's a table-based line, so that's supposedly the best defense for both sides there, for both white and black. And that's also the absolute ironclad proof, if you needed to see it, that white did have a one game there. This was a real tough, interesting chess game. I appreciate you watching my chess video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like my chess videos, you don't have to, but if you feel so motivated, I absolutely would love it if you wanted to support my efforts please visit the PayPal website, and you can contribute to my websites by just simply visiting the PayPal website and using my email, which is lifemasteraj@yahoo.com. And you can contribute to my efforts building web pages and making chess videos if you feel so inclined. If you don't, then, of course, it's just a free ride for you. And, you're more than welcome just to enjoy it, totally free on the internet. And that's one of the good things about the internet. And hopefully, you were able to learn something. Again, please check out my webpage. A lot of effort went into that web page. So I'm hoping you will also look at the web page. A lot of the different lines. There's a whole opening survey there on the English opening. A lot of top GM games that were played relatively recently there are referred. I think I find what is the very best lines using all the tools, the chess books, the engines, the things like the Ribka book and the Fritz Power book, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you will check out my webpage, I believe you'll see it's fairly well done. I took about 3 weeks to analyze the game, and then another basically week and a half, almost 2 weeks to format the web page and to sharpen it up and make it look nice. Add the diagrams. There's plenty of diagrams. More than likely, except for the end game, you can follow the game simply by following the diagrams on my web page. And also, too, there's a link both on my web page and will be below this video to the Chess Games website, and you can replay this game on the web page on the Chess Games website and replay the whole game at your own pace. And one thing, if you wanted to do, was you could open up my web page, open up another window, another browser window, and have the Chess Games web page, and just play move by move and follow along the analysis there. And that way, if you can't follow the game, that's the way you can follow the game without even setting up a chessboard. If you don't have a chessboard handy, all you have is your laptop. So anyway, thank you for watching my chess video. That concludes my chess video for today. I really enjoyed bringing you this game. I hope you enjoyed this. My thanks especially to both Morphishine and Patriot on the Chess Games website. They've been helping me lately pick my games of the month. Patriot was really the one that initially, saw this game, brought it to my attention, and said, hey, he suggested that you really need to look at this game as your game of the month. And it was almost fate. I mean, it was really, it was just an amazing how much this game grabbed me. And also, too, the other reason being that, it was a pivotal game. Morozevich is one of my favorite players. He played a brilliant game, didn't quite bring home the point. And also, too, the idea of using the English, which I've never used as my a featured opening in my Game of the Month website. So that covers another gap, and that's a good thing to do in my Game of the Month, because I've covered just about every opening now on my Game of the Month website. And I just thank you for watching this video. I hope you'll continue to watch my videos and visit my webpage. And thank you for watching, and have a great day.